Hi everyone, and welcome to Shukin Science. In this video, we'll take a look at the structures of the eyes and talk about how they work together to facilitate the process of sight. Starting with the outermost layer of the eye, known as the sclera. Now, the sclera is probably what you picture when you think of an eyeball, that tough outermost layer, that thick white part that you can see from the outside. That's the sclera. And its job is really just to serve as a protective layer. It's really tough to cut through. If you've ever had the chance to do an eye dissection, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so that helps to maintain the integrity of the eye, as well as just kind of provide a nice protective casing for all the other more important structures. Now, the sclera is also loaded with blood vessels to help supply other tissues with nutrients. However, when you move closer to the front of the eye, the sclera goes from white to clear, and that means it also doesn't contain any blood vessels. That front part of the sclera is what we refer to as the cornea. And it is just as tough and durable as the sclera. However, being clear allows the light to pass directly through the cornea and enter the pupil of the eye. Now, because the cornea is clear and doesn't contain any blood vessels, it needs something to provide it with nutrients and allow for gas exchange. And that is the role of this little pocket of fluid that sits just beneath the cornea, called the aqueous humor. It is also transparent, and so just like the cornea, it allows wavelengths of light to actually enter the eye. Now, the passageway of light into the eye isn't an actual structure. There's no membrane. It's actually just a hole, and that is kind of in this region here, which we know as the pupil. So the pupil is just the entryway of light into the eye. The size of your pupil can be controlled by these bands of smooth muscle on either side, which collectively are known as the iris. So when there's really bright light and you want to protect the back layers of your eyes where all these sensitive cells are, the iris will actually constrict the size of the pupil and prevent less light from entering the eye. And of course, vice versa is also true in dim light conditions. The iris will dilate the pupil to allow more light to enter the back. All right, so once light moves through the pupil, it's then going to encounter its first actual structure of the inside of the eye, which is the lens. And the lens is also clear, again, to facilitate the passageway of light. However, its job is actually to focus the light. So rather than just allowing light to move through, the lens helps to refract all these wavelengths of light that are entering the eye and make sure that they get focused on the back of the retina. So this layer here at the very back of the eye, that's the retina. And it is also the most important layer because the cells that are found in the retina are what allow us to see. So we'll talk about the retina in a minute here, but what we should understand so far is as light moves through the pupil, it hits the lens, which then refracts the light and focuses it on the back of that retina structure. Now, most of the eye is actually empty space, but it's not a pocket of air. It's actually a big pocket of fluid. So this fluid has a very similar composition to the aqueous humor. It is referred to, however, as the vitreous humor. And rather than supplying tissues with nutrients, the job of the vitreous humor is really just to maintain this nice circular shape of the eyeball. That's what's going to allow light to move through it nice and easily. It's also clear in color. So the vitreous humor and aqueous humor, while similar in composition, do actually have slightly different roles. All right. So like I said, eventually that light will hit this back layer of the eye called the retina. And this is the most important structure in our eyes because the retina is loaded with tiny cells called photoreceptors. Now, there's actually two types of photoreceptors that we see in the retina. The one that I've shown in black here that is scattered throughout the entire layer, those ones are not known as rods, and they are responsible for detecting lower intensity wavelengths of light, which basically allow us to perceive black and white or grayscale, dark versus light. That is the job of rods. So it makes sense that they're scattered equally throughout the peripherals of our retina because it allows us to perceive dark and light no matter where our focus is drawn. The other type of photoreceptor, however, you can see I've dotted here in this red. Those ones are known as cones. And cones tend to be concentrated towards the center of the retina, which again explains a little bit of our color vision because it's the cones that respond to high intensity wavelengths of light and allow us to perceive different colors. But you've probably noticed you can only really perceive color really well when you're looking directly at an object. Look at something right in front of you. It's very easy to tell what the color of that thing is. But it's very difficult to see colors in our peripheral vision, and that's because cones tend to be located here in the middle of the retina, whereas rods, like I said, are kind of equally distributed throughout. So another nice, easy way of remembering this is C. Cones detect color. C for color. Whereas rods, those are the photoreceptors that detect grayscale, shades, or black and white. And together, these two photoreceptors give us a really, really precise image of the world around us. Now, when different wavelengths of light hit those photoreceptors, it causes them to generate an action potential. That action potential then is moved down through this nerve here to the occipital lobe. So that nerve is going to bring information all the way to the back of our brain to be interpreted by that lobe in order for us to actually understand what we're looking at. All right, lastly, we do have one other layer that sits just behind the retina here. So because the retina prioritizes the action of photoreceptors, it also doesn't really have a ton of blood vessels running through it. So in order for those cells to be properly nourished, then that's actually what this layer here does. That one is called the choroid tissue or the choroid layer. And it is packed full of blood vessels that will supply nutrients to the cells of the retina to allow them to function properly. So there's lots of different disorders that can affect the different structures of the eyes. If your rods, for example, don't have enough of a nutrient called rhodopsin, they may not function properly, and that can lead to night blindness. You actually have different cones that respond to different wavelengths of light, and there's a genetic mutation that affects the green and red ones that could lead to color blindness. And then there's all sorts of other conditions that affect the lens. For some people, the lens is misshapen and it causes the light to focus in front or behind the eye. Or the eyeball itself could be misshapen and cause the light to focus in front or behind the retina there. And those can mostly be fixed with things like corrective glasses. Now, the lens isn't actually just floating in place here. One thing I should add is that it's kind of anchored in its spot and controlled by another set of smooth muscles and ligaments. Okay, so these are called the ciliary bodies. So the ciliary body is what I've shown in pink. Those are the smooth muscles that will push against the lens to allow it to focus as needed. And then the things that actually anchor the lens in place, those are the suspensory ligaments. So even though there are a few different conditions that can affect our vision and the way the eye functions, a lot of them can be really easily treated with corrective lenses. and even more modern technologies like laser eye surgery. All right, hope that was helpful. Thanks for listening.